Opposition to Ohio data centers grows. And does Ohio have too many universities? Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. Once the pioneers of the Silicon Heartland, data centers are falling out of favor. At first, communities largely welcomed the warehouses of computers as the tech industry started to grow in Ohio. Ohio has some 200 of the centers, with more on the way, and they are getting bigger and bigger as computing needs grow. That has put pressure on electric grids. Increased demand has led to rising utility bills. They need a lot of water. Data centers are encroaching on suburban subdivisions and eating up farmland. Politicians are feeling the backlash. And this week, a group began an effort to ask voters to ban large data centers in Ohio. Morgan Harper, where is this all coming from? Is it one thing that's fueling the opposition, or is it a bunch of different things to these data centers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple strands of organizing going on here, and I kind of put it in two buckets. The first bucket is those that are data center first. And so this is like the folks that are talking about this constitutional amendment from the rural areas, folks in the suburbs, including in Columbus, that have had data centers built right next to them that are worried about the environmental impacts, in addition to some of these other impacts on lifestyle and their property values, let's say. But then we have the utility first angle on this, and people who, also from just like a cost of living perspective, are really concerned about the increase on the grid and then how that's impacting electricity bills and eventually water, like you said. And so I think what's really interesting about both of those camps is when they come together, just how much pressure there's going to continue to be on the state government and the federal government and local governments now we're seeing to do something about it.
Michael, lawmakers caught off guard by this? I mean, when Google and Meta and Amazon first started building these things, nobody really noticed them. They kind of looked like clean warehouses. Yeah. All of a sudden, they're hearing about it. The lawmakers are.
I have spoken to a vast majority of legislators on the Republican side in the House and Senate, and they're all hearing it. They're all feeling it. But they're in a tough position here because there are economic benefits for data centers. There are tax implications that help our local schools and what have you. So what we need to do is find a win-win. But this battle isn't at the State House, Mike. This battle is in local communities. You heard from Morgan talking about an effort to put in the constitutional amendment. Brown County wants to do an ordinance that would ban it in Brown County. But there could be a win-win. And here's where I'm going with this. Microsoft just announced this week, or it's their second time they've announced in a month, that they're willing to do four things right off the bat. No more tax abatements, number one. Microsoft said any of our data centers, no tax abatements, number one. Number two, they're going to pay for their own grid upgrades, no more putting it on the backs of residential homeowners, and a couple other things that invest in schools and this and that. So is it perfect? No, but is it a start? Yes. Let's find a way where we can allow them to be built in places they want to build. I don't want them built in my NIMBY, not in my backyard. I get that, Morgan. I'm with you.
Not my position, by the way.
Well, it's a lot of people's position. And so at the end of the day, we can do this, but we have to work at the local level first, because it's probably not going to be a State House solution to this.
So that's just companies saying no tax abatements. That's kind of a unique stand. That's a business decision, though. They need these centers to be built. And now, instead of pressuring for tax abatements, they're saying, okay, never mind, just let us build it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we're seeing at the State House, there's a discussion about whether there should be an override to kind of get rid of these tax breaks for data centers. And you're seeing some interesting bedfellows on this topic, because on one hand, you have some of the Democrats who are hearing from their union representatives who are saying, we like building these things, we need those jobs. And then you have other Democrats who are concerned about the, affordability and the environmental issues. On the Republican side, you have the chamber saying, we like this business. And then you have rural voters who are saying, we don't want these in our backyard. And so there really is an interesting, mix of politics on this. It doesn't align, very clearly on one side or the other.
Karen, you know what we need?
What do we need?
We need a commission to study data centers. And that's what lawmakers are going to do.
Guess what? There's a bill that would do exactly that. And what was funny is hearing the testimony on that and the number of people who were showing up to say they were opposed to data centers. And that's not what this was about. It's about a commission to study the issue, because there really isn't a whole lot that we know about data centers independently. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce did a study that says 95,000 jobs are related to data centers as of 2024, but there are people in local communities who would say, I don't think that there's a whole lot of evidence of that. But I think what's interesting about the data center amendment, as well as the abolish the property taxes amendment, you've got groups of people who are maybe not along the same lines in terms of perspectives, who are saying, we're frustrated with what we're getting from local officials and from the state, and we want to go to the ballot and directly take it to voters. Now, they've got a lot of work to get there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see both of these two camps kind of saying, we're frustrated.
Yeah, I talked to one of the organizers of the data center constitutional amendment push, and they're passionate, but they don't seem very organized. They need to collect 700,000 signatures by July, so it's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is, the win-win proposal that Mike put out there, and a lot of the solutions that are being discussed do depend on a Public Utilities Commission of Ohio that is willing to do its job and oversee these utilities that are making billions, oversee the tech companies that are making trillions. Certainly don't need any more tax abatements, but even in a world where we allow them to build, the agreements that are being struck need to be enforced. And there ultimately is a utility breakdown here and regulatory breakdown that is also causing these higher prices for electricity bills.
Some of these data centers in New Albany are building power plants next door. Basically, they're huge jet engines fueled by natural gas that will power the plant. Not efficient, probably real costly. Is that a solution?
It's a part of the solution, and New Albany is doing it right. They have a great center there that all 49 other states are coming to Ohio to look at what New Albany's building, and they're very particular how they're building it. So as you said, they're putting that power plant in. They're paying for it themselves. They're using that energy to take the stress off residents. It is true. And I can tell you for a fact that it's working for New Albany, though. But that's a solution for them. That might not be a solution for Dublin.
It's not a solution for Morgan Harper. You're shaking your head.
It's not a solution for Morgan Harper because we have to get out of this myth that somehow we're going to solve this suburb by suburb. These are systemic issues. AI is a systemic question about what it's going to do and be used for in our society. And regulation is done at the state and across the regional level. So this idea that somehow we can just take it that New Albany is going to strike a good deal with Microsoft and we're all going to be okay is a complete fallacy, and we need to remove it from the solution set.
Jesse, is this any different? I mean, throughout our history, new technology comes in and it's very disruptive, whether it's a new, textile mill, a paper mill, a new shopping mall, a subdivision sprawl. Is this just the latest chapter in this, the evolution of society? That it's data centers now, and that's what's disrupting the economy and some lives in suburbs and rural areas.
I do think we're in a situation where the technology and the business is going ahead of the government right now. So you have state lawmakers who are trying to learn up on this, local zoning boards that are trying to understand what their limits and benefits are and so forth. So I think we're lagging a little bit behind, and there are consequences for that as well.
Okay. The fallout from Ted Carter's abrupt resignation as OSU president continues. Carter quit after admitting to an inappropriate relationship with a podcaster sponsored by JobsOhio. The private public economic development agency gave her $60,000 for 4 episodes of the little watched podcast on veterans. Former Governor John Kasich, who helped create JobsOhio, took to social media to criticize the deal and accused JobsOhio of mission creep. That brought a response from Attorney General Dave Yost, who criticized Kasich for creating a publicly funded agency that operates with no oversight. Yost urged Kasich to, quote, look in the mirror. He said, as auditor of state, he was worried about such things. He said, you, Kasich, ignored a subpoena and twisted every arm in the legislature to pass a law to stop me from auditing JobsOhio. What other things have not come to light? Karen Kessler, it's been a while. So let's have a little refresh of JobsOhio. It is a public agency, but it's completely private, and that's the way it was set up. What's going on here?
It was created in 2011 when Republican former Governor John Kasich took office. He was frustrated with the Ohio Department of Development, saying that there were too many opportunities that Ohio was losing out on, too many companies, too many jobs, and that the state was moving at the speed of government. He wanted to see it move at the speed of business. So this agency was created. It's funded with liquor profits as of 2013. It's got a 25-year deal for liquor enterprise. And so there's no taxpayer dollars here. But that also allows JobsOhio to escape public records laws. They do release some information, but it's not as transparent as a state agency would be. And that's been one of the criticisms about JobsOhio, is that there really is not a whole lot known about why they're doing and what they're doing.
So what's the attitude at the State House these days? This is a story, it's only about a week old now, but is there more calls for better oversight?
So I spoke with the Speaker, Matt Huffman, about this, and he said essentially they're not planning to bring in JobsOhio and hold hearings on this $60,000. But he did assert that the state legislature has a role, that this was set up by statute and that this isn't outside of their realm of control. In the middle of the week, a couple lawmakers introduced a bill that would add some transparency issues, bump up the audits, require JobsOhio to come into the State House occasionally and kind of explain what projects they're working on. Right now, JobsOhio doesn't have to come in until the liquor profits are up, and that's 2035.
They extended it too, I believe.
They extended 2053. So
Yeah.
I think they don't really need to set foot in the State House and say what they're doing for decades now.
So it's funded through a public resource, which was the liquor profits, the lease on the liquor sales. But there are no shareholders, Mike, and no accountability to any government agency. It's like a family-run business it's $300 million. What could go wrong?
A lot. And we're somewhere, this might just be the tip of the iceberg, but we don't know. Jesse just mentioned a piece of legislation, Justin Pazzulli. It's a bipartisan bill, by the way. The Republican is Justin Pazzulli, and that does have some teeth. I would take it one step further. There's 9 members of the board of JobsOhio. The first one is the governor. The governor is a board member. He gets to appoint the other 8. Wow, okay, but we don't get to know what's going on behind the scene. Why don't we do this, add to that bill and say they have to be Senate confirmations for all the members. I'm a member of the State Medical Board. I have to be confirmed by the Senate if I want that seat. Just because the governor nominates me doesn't mean I don't get it. I get it, unless the Senate. So let's confirm it. Let's ask tough questions to these guys and gals before they get on this board that's behind closed doors that no one can see about. We need some oversight. LSC said in 2021 that less than 60% of the liquor profits went to new development. Where's the rest of the money going?
This is a drop. This isn't even a drop in the bucket. This is $60,000 from a $300 million organization. That's what this is all about. As scandals go, this is pretty minor. This is a grain of sand.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot going on in this specific example.
Yeah.
The dollar amount is not a lot, but the connection to OSU, the governance of OSU is another question of people asking questions of what is happening in Ohio, and are we looking out for our institutions, and are we using money wisely? But getting back to JobsOhio in particular, that 60,000 might be indicative, as other panelists have already mentioned, of more problems. And the other thing I would say is, a lot of people, it's not that we don't think there's any good uses going. I was just in Athens this week looking at the Athens Armory. They were able to include money from JobsOhio in their capital stack. But if there's that level of funds and we don't have these basic measures of accountability, the chances are a lot of it's going to things that we wouldn't all support.
Well, and Ohio State, no offense to the university that I graduated from and my son goes to right now, is not known for its transparency in many cases. So you've got that involved here as well. But I think what's interesting
and it's like clear glass compared to JobsOhio.
Well, true. Good point.
We can do public records requests at Ohio State, and it takes a while, but we get them.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, too, is to see how things are different. When JobsOhio was created, there was a lot of support for it. Kasich had brought it to the legislature. It passed. There were lawsuits, but they went away. And now you're seeing what really seems to be some concern about what's happening there. Some of the concerns that were raised at the beginning by people who were opposed to JobsOhio, who they felt like they were not being heard. Now you're hearing those, 10 years on.
JobsOhio gave $150 million to the Intel project. That's not going as well as planned. Is that something lawmakers will start to pay a bit more attention to because of this $60,000 podcast?
I think it's possible. I think when you only see the results and you don't see the process of how we got here, and you only see what money does go out when there are projects like Intel, which have not been completed on anywhere near the timeline that they expected to, people start to ask questions, and I'm sure that would be something that they would like to talk about.
And the only other point I would make is there are agencies within the state government that have the ability to deploy development resources, right? Is it necessary to have this quasi-private, almost like a family business, like you said, to be able to support good projects and even think about, when necessary, certain tax incentives for those projects? A lot of other states have seemed to be able to pull it off without
That's
the
that
JobsOhio.
balance between speed and bureaucracy, and that's what fuels us. Anyway, starting Friday, Ohioans can no longer buy most hemp products, including gummies and those THC drinks. An effort to repeal the newly passed state ban failed. Opponents of the ban failed to collect enough signatures to stop the law and put the issue on the ballot. The new law also places new, relatively minor changes to Ohio's legal marijuana system. You cannot smoke pot in public. You cannot bring out-of-state marijuana into Ohio. And you have to keep all that pot in your trunk when you are driving. Jesse Baumert, this was really not about health. This was about profits, right? This repeal effort and this law. Hemp folks wanted to continue to sell their products, and marijuana folks didn't want the competition.
I mean, that was certainly one element to it. I think folks who wanted to continue, particularly the THC-infused beverages, are extremely popular, and people were building businesses off of this, and to have that taken away, even though there was like some murkiness about the laws underneath, I think that was certainly a point of frustration for people who were purchasing those items.
But could there have been a middle ground with especially the beverages, because they were popular, and it's no different than buying a beer or a drink at a bar if it was regulated differently?
I don't think so, because the industry hung themselves. The nerds, the Skittles, the fake nerds, the fake candy, and gas stations available to kids my age, 13-year-old son and his buddies walking into a gas station. Luckily, they didn't buy them. They did it to themselves. So if you can't be a responsible adult and market your entity and make a profit, then shame on you. So no, I don't think there's a middle ground, because they're all bad actors. Most of them are bad actors. So no, there's no room for them.
Is it just too hard, Morgan, to get on the ballot in the state? I mean, they only had, 2 months? And the first petition was rejected, so they cut that time even more. It shows you how hard it is to get on the ballot here.
It is, and then also, the lack of faith that people have that the legislature is an avenue for moving, different changes. Because I don't think it is necessarily unrealistic or weird to want to have to adjust different regulations as we learn more information. But if we can't depend on the legislature to be a source for that, well, then folks continue to have to go here, and it's a very high bar to be able to succeed at an amendment level or ballot initiative.
Are we done talking about marijuana now, Karen? The law is the law. Voters approved it. You can't put it in your trunk. I understand that, I guess. No, like open container in a car, it's similar to that. Can't smoke it in public. Can't go to Michigan and bring your pot back anymore. But are we done now?
Well, it took 2 years for the changes from the law that voters approved till this. And Governor Mike DeWine had talked about this intoxicating hemp for that entire 2-year period, pressuring lawmakers to do something about that. So right now, maybe we're in a lull, but certainly there will be things that will likely come up that maybe changes will want to be made in the future. But to Morgan's point, are lawmakers going to be responsible and responsive to voters who, you've got a group of voters, a majority of Ohio voters who said that this is what they wanted, and then the legislature made some tweaks in that law?
Is the tweaks going to be satisfied enough to the folks who really don't like this law in the legislature?
For the time being. I mean, I can only beat a horse so many times, right? At the end of the day, so I don't think there's anything left to do now. Again, look, something might evolve, but the private sector may try to do something that is less than desirable, hurts kids, then they'll have to come back and revisit it. But I think now, look, there's 400 total licenses available. They've only issued 200, so there's still 200 more dispensary licenses that are available across the state of Ohio. So let's see what happens.
And it seems to be. I mean, there's been some minor problems. There's some research that shows that it's not as harmless as people thought it was originally. But the dispensary system seems to be working okay, right, Jesse?
I think it depends on who you ask, but I think there has been concern about the price, especially compared competitively with Michigan.
Yeah.
But as far as safety concerns and so forth, I've not heard of some massive issue that has come up.
I wonder if I'll still get the coupons from the Michigan dispensaries. I get these buy one, get one. No, I don't know, but I get them every few months. It's the coupon book for the Michigan dispensaries. Buy one, get one free. Sale on the whatever the new thing is. It's a lot different than how it works in Ohio. Anyway, I never go up there, but I get them coupons. The Republican candidate for governor, Vivek Ramaswamy, this week once again drew criticism for a bold idea. When touting his plan for eliminating the state income tax, he said the state had to cut costs and operate more efficiently.
Look at the number of universities in our state. I love universities in Ohio. I want us to have the best universities. But we have too many of them. Absolutely. They need to be consolidated. And when you consolidate them, they can actually be centers of excellence who are actually the best in their respective domains instead of trying to create replicas and clones of one another throughout the state.
Democratic rival Amy Acton pounced, calling Ramaswamy out of touch with Ohioans. Ramaswamy's campaign later argued the candidate was not calling for the elimination of schools, just cutting the costly bureaucracy. But Mike Onadakis, he said clearly Ohio has too many universities. Is this another case of him taking a bold stand and getting out maybe too far ahead of where people were thinking?
No, look, people can make a statement and clarify it, and that's exactly what Vivek did in that case. But look, I'm in agreement with him. Our taxpayers, each of us around this table, pay taxes. 14 four-year universities in the state of Ohio, 23 two-year community colleges in the state of Ohio. We have too many. Why is Kent State 15 minutes away from Akron, offering the same classes, the same dorms, the same presidents? We have two presidents, two comms directors, two football teams, two basketball teams. So Columbus State, Ohio State, 10 minutes away from each other. Why do we have all
Why not stick with the statement? Because he really walked it back.
He did.
If you have too many of something, you have to get rid of them. If you have too many socks in your sock drawer, you get one of the ones. You get rid of the ones with holes and the ones that don't match. Okay. You get rid of them. That's what he was saying we should do.
But he also said in that clip we should focus on centers of excellence. The University of Akron polymers, best in the nation, in my humble opinion. I'm an Akron grad from law school there. Their polymers is second to none. Kent State, I think they're really good at journalism, or nursing. Excuse me, nursing. Let's let them do nursing. But why do we have Cleveland State Law School and Akron Law School? It's redundant. We don't need two. So that's what he meant. Why do we have two of everything 10 minutes away from each other? It's too expensive. We can't afford it.
Well, it's funny, everything odd that Vivek Ramaswamy says is a reminder to me how, especially right now in Republican politics, you don't necessarily need to be very good at running for office to continue to have legs if you have the backing of Donald Trump and a lot of money. Because for most candidates, if you say something that's really silly and people don't like it, well, then there's going to be some repercussions for that. And he's been able to just kind of secure this primary. So that's one point. On the actual substance of how many schools we should have in Ohio, I think that Amy Acton was right to critique this. Obviously, he thought it was a mistake to say because, to your point, he walked it back. But again, throughout the campaign, especially as we get into that general election, we have to not only critique but also then offer that kind of forward-looking vision of, okay, there is a real discussion to be had about the future of education in Ohio, and what's our take on that as Democrats?
And Acton's campaign really seized on this by putting out a bracket and calling it Vivek Ramaswamy's March Sadness and pitting colleges against each other and crossing them all out. So they really seized on this a little bit. But I think this is not a new idea. Going back again to John Kasich. When he was in office, one of the first discussions that was being had, and Jim Petro, the former Attorney General, came forward with this, proposing duplicative programs, getting rid of them, and especially programs that cost a lot of money, like aviation. There were a lot of schools that had aviation programs. Those are expensive. But I think one of the solutions here is community colleges. And you hear people on the conservative side and the progressive side talking about how community colleges can really play a role in lowering college costs and providing basic education before you get to the higher levels of individual majors.
Any person who follows a school board knows that closing a school is impossible. But you look at the University of Akron in Wright State, enrollment is down 39% in the past 20 years. University of Toledo down 32%. Cincinnati is up 60%, OSU and OU are up about 15%, so they're doing okay. But Akron, Wright State, Toledo, that's some serious problems there. Is Vivek onto something here?
I mean, I think there are very real challenges facing higher education, especially as there are fewer people going to college. And these are things that we're going to have to grapple with. Is consolidation the right answer? Obviously, Vivek thought so for a moment and then kind of declined back from that. Like you said, it is controversial to want to close someone's alma mater, and that will always draw a lot of attention.
And I would add one thing really quick, too. There was a study done by the Center for Community Solutions a couple years ago about the economic impact that these colleges and universities whether public or private, have, especially in smaller communities. So if you close those schools, you're going to really hit the economy of those smaller places.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike Godadakis, you're up first.
I'm not involved with the property tax repeal, but I talked to someone who was this morning, and they are very confident that they will turn in enough signatures to make this to the ballot. So when we criticize Vivek Ramaswamy's ideas about consolidating our universities, trying to find ways to save money, we better take a second look at those, because this is coming. And if it makes the ballot, I guarantee it's going to pass.
Morgan.
We talked about Dave Yost earlier going after JobsOhio. He also has decided to continue the fight to break up Ticketmaster. And that was a bit of a surprise where a lot of Republican AGs backed off after the Fed settled. And Dave Yost was not one of them. So we'll see how that goes with the states running the case.
Interesting. Karen.
This is going to, I don't know how this is going to weigh in on the data center argument, but as we are sitting here this afternoon, there's an enormous data center announcement coming out of Piketon, Pike County. The former Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant is being redeveloped. A huge data center, 10 megawatts. I think it's more than that. I don't know. It's a lot. Gigawatts, 10 gigawatts. There we go. And also a natural gas plant to power that. So this is all going to come into this debate that we started out the show with.
Right. Jesse.
I've been fascinated by a trial that happened in Adams County involving Afro Man and some sheriff's office deputies where the First Amendment did prevail.
He's a rapper. Had some footage of them going through his house, and he won out.
And his suit.
Oh,
The American flag suit. Oh, my. It was something.
All right, well, March Madness is here, and I know Buckeye fans are disappointed the men bowed out kind of early, but the OSU women's basketball team, they are still alive, play Saturday, and hopefully Monday, and the OSU women's hockey team is still very much doing very well and going for a championship. So March Madness is not over for other teams. Miami is there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've won by the time you see this show or not. I don't know. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. If you miss us, say to watch March Madness, you can catch us anytime on your time. We're on the WOSU News YouTube channel, as well as our website, WOSU.org, and the PBS app. For our crew and panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.